as an atheist, I really struggled with suicide. And so, I mean, I've always struggled with suicide and like suicide ideation in my life. Even now as a believer, and I'll talk about that to answer the other part of your question. But it just felt like, why? Like, what's the point? Like, life goes on. No one's going to remember me. It doesn't really matter what I do.
You know, in this video, we weren't meant to go here. We were not meant to go here in this video, but I really feel like God is using this for a reason.
I think I came to preach today. That wasn't that funny.
Hey everybody, listen, I'm excited to be here today. Welcome back to the channel. This is my younger brother, Pastor Ruben. He serves as the executive pastor of our church. And today we're going to talk about what our favorite Bible verse is and why. And then I want you in the comment section to make sure you put down your favorite Bible verse and why.
So, Ro,
who do we start? Who starts here?
You. I think we should obviously, that's your channel.
Okay.
What is your favorite Bible verse?
Without a shadow of a doubt, if I were to get a tattoo of my favorite Bible verse, it would be Acts 20:24. And it says that my life is worth nothing to me unless I use it to fulfill my assignment. It says, this is the Apostle Paul speaking, and he says, my life is worth nothing to me unless it's for fulfilling the assignment. And then it continues to say the assignment of sharing the message of God's grace. And the reason that that's my favorite verse of the Bible is because for me, it's a declaration of purpose. Like, I don't know, for me, it spoke to me so strongly because I think that our life could be made up of so many things that are not really the most important things. You know, like, so for me, I'm like, I always use this analogy, like, if I send you to the store and I say, hey, man, I need you to go get me some Pringles sour cream and onion chips. And you go to the store and then you get me a Malta and then you get me a soda and then you get me some Snickers and then you come back and you're like, yo, Ro, I got you these, I got you so much stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but I was looking for sour cream and onion Pringle chips. And you're like, yeah, but I got you. Yeah, that's nice, but that's not why I sent you to the store. That wasn't the purpose that I sent you to the store. And so I think in life sometimes God has a purpose for us all. Yeah. And we're like, but God, I did this, and God, I achieved this, and God, look at this marriage, and God, look at this job that I got, and God, look at all this money that I got, and God, look at the retirement fund. No, and God is like, yeah, but I've given you a purpose. Yeah. And the Apostle Paul declares, he's like, hey, my life is not my own. My life is worth nothing to me. That, like, my life is not for me to have this kind of like selfish ambition and this drive to do what I desire and what my preferences are. He goes, my life is worth nothing to me unless I use it to fulfill my assignment. Yeah. And I'm one of those guys that I genuinely believe that there is a general assignment and a general purpose for all of humanity, but then there's these individual kind of nuanced assignments that he's given us for us to fulfill in our own lives. And so for me, it's Acts 20:24.
I want to ask, because I feel like it bears asking.
Okay.
Do you remember the moment like that became, was it the first time you read it and that was it? It just stuck with you, or was it like maybe you know, a lot of times you read it and then one day it just catches you?
No, it caught me from the very beginning, but it wasn't necessarily my favorite. Throughout the years, it began becoming my favorite. The more and more I read it, the more it became alive to me. Even to the point, like, it was one of my favorite verses, even before I kind of understood that his assignment was to preach the message of God's grace. So it was one of my favorite verses even before I had the revelation of God's grace. You know, so I always read that. And I was like, it was purpose. It's all about purpose. And then to now, here we are years later, and I've experienced God's grace, and I feel like the message of the unadulterated grace of God has been revealed to me, and I'm like, yeah, like for me, it's like, wow, I relate to that more than I ever have.
Yeah.
Because he's like, my life is worth nothing to me unless it's for my assignment, and my assignment is to preach the grace of God.
That's good.
So yeah, it's evolved into that. Originally, it connected with me significantly because when I first encountered God, I want to say maybe not the first, maybe really the second time. I was about 17 years old, and I want to say this is when God not just saved me but really called me. I feel like at 10 years old he called me. I was maybe about 8 or 10. It was honestly in children's church. It was a clown who preached the
Why
message
haven't I
of
heard
the
this story?
gospel.
A clown?
He was a clown. His name is El Payaso Flong Flong. And if you're out there, I would love to connect with you. El Payaso Flong Flong. It was a Spanish church, and I got saved under him. That was the first time I remember crying. He had a whole presentation in kids' church, and then at the end it says, "Hey, if you would like to have an encounter with Jesus, I want you to stay after children's church." And me and another girl stood after service, and I remember both of us were crying. And we both gave our life to Jesus. Her name was Kimberly Vega, and his name was El Payaso Flong Flong. And we gave our life to Jesus. I want to say I was 8 to 10 years old. But again, you go through life. But really when I felt called was when I was 17. When I was 17, I felt like I wasn't serving God. I wasn't following his ways. I wasn't really submitted to him. And I felt like in a worship service, in a youth worship service, the Holy Spirit spoke to me. And he said, there are people that won't hear my message because you're not speaking it. Wow. And that was it. And so for me, it was like, it's just connected. Crazy. Once I got that verse of the Bible, Acts 20:24, my life is worth nothing to me.
Yeah, it's crazy being, I've heard you say that story, but it's crazy being here, 300,000 subscribers, and not just the amount, but I've seen the comments. I've seen literally people walk up to him at other churches, like almost saying that same sentiment, like, wow. Thank you, your videos, all that. I'm going to ask you one more question before I share my verse. How has that, like, how do you apply that? How have you applied that verse on a daily basis? Not on a daily basis, but maybe like just in a practical way. How do you use it? Like, how does it work for your life?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it always kind of like centers you back, you know, like it always brings you back, kind of like, hey, whenever you have the tendency to kind of make things about you. Whenever you want to make things, even ministry, it's so easy to make ministry about you. It's all like, especially in the social media era. It's like, hey, how come, I talk to a lot of ministers and preachers and young influencers, and oftentimes it's like, hey, how do I get here, and what am I not doing right, and I haven't figured this out, and honestly, like, whether God calls us to minister to 1 or 1,000, I know we say it, but we don't really live by it. This verse centers me. It brings me back to like, hey, if God has called me to pastor 100 people in a church for the next 20 years, am I faithful to that? Paul wasn't James, and James wasn't Peter, and you see the Apostle Paul like going on mission trip after mission trip, and not all the apostles did that. Some stood as church planners in the church, overseeing the church. But the Apostle Paul was like, I got to go and spread the gospel. Well, for me, is that if this is my assignment, whatever it is, will I be faithful to it? That.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
What's your favorite verse? Yeah, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for this video. Look what just came in the mail. It's from EST33. I absolutely love this clothing company and what it represents. As you can see, it represents the kingdom. Here's what I know about Jesus. He didn't come to establish a religion. He came to establish a kingdom. Take a moment to check out our new sponsors and go get yourself some amazing hoodies from EST33. All the info is in the description area.
So it's so funny that that's your favorite. Well, what's funny is the way you explained that it's your favorite verse. And so I'll just get into mine and I'll tell you why it's funny. So my favorite verse, it comes out of my favorite book. My favorite book of all time is Ecclesiastes. And so for those of you who don't know, like my background, I was an atheist, and as I was an atheist, I leaned more towards nihilism, which nihilists believe nothing makes sense and all of life is meaningless. And I didn't even know this book existed in the Bible, but the ethos of Ecclesiastes is, this is a biblical book. All of life is meaningless. Like it's of no value. And so my favorite verse, I don't have it memorized, but it's literally the first verse. It's Hevel Hevalim, the original language. It's vanity of vanities. What does man get from all his toil, from all his work? And then the writer, the collector, goes on into to list, like, we do this and it's in vain. We do this and it's in vain. And it's funny because it's a verse that centers me and reminds me in the same way that Paul, I think, is drawing from the Old Testament and some of these ideologies. In other verses, he says, I consider life rubbish, trash in comparison to knowing Jesus.
Yeah.
And the where Ecclesiastes lands is ultimately what we have, and the thing that matters is God. And it, for me, I'm an Enneagram 7. Any Enneagram 7s out there, I can get so caught up in the getting and the pursuing and the chasing after material things, and not even in a like I just want, or like a materialistic way, but just caught up in it because it matters. Or again, my personality type is going from one thing to the next and experience after experience, or I can be very impatient. And Ecclesiastes is a reminder, like, ultimately these things, they don't matter. A generation comes and a generation goes. We, like, name a president. That's not Lincoln. That's not Washington. That's not Obama. That's not Trump. That's not Biden. Name the presidents, but number 2 through 15. Like, we can't.
Yeah.
And even if we do, their lives aren't at the forefront of ours. And ultimately, it's just a reminder to me that this life is but a vapor. And if I'm trying to pursue life, the physical, natural world, I'm storing up treasures in this earth, and it's all ephemeral and it's all wasted. But if I'm about the kingdom, if I'm about God, if I'm chasing eternity, and I love what C.S. Lewis says. C.S. Lewis says, if we find in us desires of which this world cannot satisfy us, because it can't. I feel like all of life is an Amazon package. I love waiting for the package. When it arrives, it loses all of its enjoyment. It's like, oh, it's here now. It's just part of the house. C.S. Lewis says, if we find that there's nothing on earth that can satisfy our desires, it must mean that we're meant for another world.
Yeah.
And so it's always like just a calibration for me, like, hey, like, aim somewhere else. Don't aim here. Don't do the YouTube stuff for the sake of here. Don't do the church building stuff for the sake of here.
Wow.
Do it for eternity. Do it for God.
Wow. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think about what you said in terms of just the things that we're doing and why we're doing it. And I always feel like, referring to the Amazon package, I'm like, when we worry about something, it's always worse than what the result will be. But also, I've also realized that usually my excitement and my expectation oftentimes is greater than what the result will be as well. Yeah. It's like, when I think about like, this is going to be my day. And it's like, I'm looking forward to that day, and I'm going to, it's competition day, or it's going to be like when I get there, it's like the excitement was way overdrawn or compared to when you experience it. Now let me ask you in terms of the Enneagram number, and I wasn't going to bring my Enneagram number into this, but I think that that's part of why I connected with my verse as well.
I was going to say that,
because
he's an Enneagram 3.
Enneagram 3. So for me, it's like there was this desire to want to do more for God, want to achieve for God. So I embraced it from that regard, and really just seeing it almost like with one eye, because I wasn't seeing the whole thing, the whole picture. But you saying that you were sharing it as you were an atheist. Do you feel like as an atheist you experience a lot of those things as well? And how does that work now as a believer, as a pastor, as a husband, as someone that's been serving God for maybe 7 to 8 years? always feeling like that, like nothing matters, and then you read a verse like that. Like, how does that connect to who you used to be versus now who you are?
Right. So, well, so when I said, it's crazy, I didn't know this book existed. I felt like I couldn't find a lot of thinking like that, a lot of nihilistic thinking, and maybe it's out there. But to later find out that this is in the Bible, it was like, oh yeah, the Bible is really not scared to talk about anything.
Right.
Like, I think Christianity has this rep because people tend to use it as, people believe in God because that gives them the hope, and it's all these positive verses. Like, no, there's some dark stuff. Like, you read Job. The book of Job is not a story about like how God tested Job and Job just had so much faith. Like, Job is like talking about suicide ideation.
Yeah.
Paul talks about suicide ideation. And here you have this guy, this king in Ecclesiastes who says, hey, I've seen it all. I've done it all. And let me tell you, it actually says he was a preacher. Like, this is a preaching. That's where Ecclesiastes, it's the assembly. And this is what he's saying to people. He's like, hey, it's all worthless. And to see that was in the Bible was like, whoa, like the Bible's okay with talking about this stuff.
And it's not always trying to fix it.
No.
It's not toxic positivity. It's not like, oh yeah, well now it is, and let me just show you. No, it wasn't. It's just like, this is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as an atheist, I really struggled with suicide. And so, I've always struggled with suicide and like suicide ideation in my life. Even now as a believer, and I'll talk about that to answer the other part of your question. But it just felt like, why? Like, what's the point? Like, life goes on. No one's going to remember me. It doesn't really matter what I do.
Hey, Pastor O here, and I want to hit the pause button for a moment just to let you know about how you can connect as well as partner up to support our ministry. It's only going to take 30 seconds of your time, and then you can go back to watching the rest of this video. Here's the first one. If you need prayer, give us an opportunity to pray for you by visiting prayforme.kuhau.com and submit your prayer request. Number 2, become a Patreon partner. You can become a Patreon partner for as low as $1. You can find all the details in the description, and you can find our merchandise link there as well. And here's the last one. If you are looking for a church community, visit us at kuhau.com/new. Let us know a little bit about yourself so that we can plug you into our church family. Okay, now let's get back to the video.
And it was just a struggle. What was weird is I couldn't, there were things that existed in me that didn't make sense, and they were very contradictory. And so it was like, well, if nothing matters, why can't I be selfish? Why is there in me this moral compass? Even though I've already decided and judged that society and moral value and rules, that's all just a construct. What we say is good here. We're bilingual. We speak Spanish. What is a perfectly normal word here is a vulgar curse in another country, in another language. Rules are made up. But I still find that certain rules I can't break. I can't break the law of love. And I can't not have compassion for people. And I really, really struggled with it.
Wow.
So yeah, that's where I was a lot as an atheist. Just in my head, like, I found a lot of contradictions. And not as an atheist, again, not all atheists are like that. I found myself leaning more towards nihilistic philosophies. As a believer, it's honestly comforting seeing a book like Ecclesiastes, seeing that there are writers who dealt with depression, who dealt with feeling like life was meaningless. A couple of months ago, I was dealing with what I think is even seasonal depression for myself. And I remember waking up feeling like life doesn't matter.
And in this video, we weren't meant to go here. We were not meant to go here in this video, but I really feel like God is using this for a reason. But
of course,
you were saying a few months ago you were even dealing with some of this,
and knowing Ecclesiastes was a good grounding thing for me, because again, here's that verse, like God saying, like, yeah, you're right. Don't focus on those things. But in that moment, I tell my wife, and she was reading a book, and she was like, yeah, I was just having that same thought. And she has it with such positivity. It's like, isn't that so fun? Like, we get to do whatever, like we get to create, we get to do, because we don't have to worry about status and title and the things that other people are caught up on, because we know it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many likes you have. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter your career. It, in the ultimate sense, it doesn't matter. And she had this positive spin, and we were talking about it later, and I remember going through it.
Shout outs to Amanda right there.
And she was like, well, what was the thing? What was the anchor? And I said, it just kept coming back to love. I kept feeling like, yeah, none of it matters. I went through every, like I have like a matrix in my mind, like a little danger room, if you're an X-Men fan, where I'm like running simulations. I'm like, okay, what would life look like if I began to pursue this? And I just imagined every decision that I could make and change, and it all led to the same place. And what I told her was, I said, the only common thread was making a difference in someone's life. Was the only thing that would ever felt fulfilling to me. And I don't know if that's a universal rule. I can't prove that.
Wow.
I just know for myself, I said, yeah, because it defies all logic. So there's a movie, iRobot, and the thing about the robot is he saves someone because statistically and logically that person had a better chance of surviving. So
this is Will Smith, iRobot?
Yeah.
Oh, love
he
that
chooses
movie.
the adult over the child. Logically and statistically, it makes more sense. But to human logic, it never makes sense. It doesn't matter. And I told her, I was like, I could be in a position, and I just know that innately within me, I could be in a position if it's between
Hold this up. There you go.
If it's between me and another person, and that person, maybe I think, that person is statistically or logistically less likely to make a difference in this world, is statistically and just not, like, if I save them, they're not going to make an impact. I'm still choosing them. If they're a more vulnerable person, I'm still choosing them. I'm more inclined to choose a person like that to save their life over my own life 10 times out of 10. And I think we all would agree, like,
wow,
if there's a child, you don't need to know that child is going to do, like, oh, this is the child that's going to solve global warming. They could just go and live with no job for the rest of their lives. Right. It doesn't matter. You save the child. And I just found in me, like, I don't know why that exists.
Yeah.
But that is the thing that, and so where I go, so the conclusion I came down to is the only thing that has meaning is to make an impact in another person's life. And if that's one person, that's enough.
Wow.
An impact is an impact.
Wow.
How that all ties to Ecclesiastes, I think it really just grounds me. So in those moments, it's a verse that I come back to that really grounds me.
Amen. Wow.
Do you have any?
Wow. I mean, I think this video went from, hey, let me hear your favorite Bible verse, to God wanting to speak.
Yeah.
And so we're going to hit the pause button right here and just say thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. By the way, if you are interested in more content like this, please comment, subscribe. You can also go to Pastor Ruben's channel. It's going to be tagged here in the description and in the title. And give this a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Also, if you are interested in any content like this, I want you to just click right here and you'll see a video recommendation. I think you'll enjoy this video as well. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one. God bless.
You want to stop it?
Hey, thank you for watching this video, and if you have found any value from it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified anytime we release anything new. And if you're interested in more videos like this one, I want to recommend this one to you. Make sure you like it, comment, share it with the world. And last but not least, I want to thank all our Patreon partners. It's because of you we can keep all our content free and share God's love with the world. Remember J1335, love is our logo.